it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, which is Ben Tilley from the Bank of Queensland. Ben is going to speak on the leadership journey that he has been the catalyst behind driving at the Bank of Queensland.
Hello everybody. What I'm going to try and do in the next half an hour is just give you a snapshot of a journey we went on developing leaders. So this is something which we started about a little over 12 months ago. And what I want you to get out of it is some kind of sense of many of you have leadership development programs in your organisation, but I just want to share with some of the things which we did, which were very simple, very easy, and worked very well. At the end, I'm going to invite a couple of my colleagues who are on the program, and I want them to tell you what they got out of it, because I think that's a really good proof as to a concept. But I'll go through some of the detail first. A bit about the bank. There's some information up there, but basically we're a small bank in a very competitive marketplace. So we're based out of Brisbane. We've got people right around Australia. In terms of our organisation, we've got 3 different organisations, you could almost say in one company. So about 12 months ago we purchased 18 months ago now, we purchased an insurance business and we purchased a finance business. So this was post the GSC. One of the main challenges, and one of the things I wanted to solve in this, is how do you try and bring your organisation together when you've got 3 separate organisations, and how do you get people to work with each other, how do you get people to collaborate, and how do we build leaders as we do that? This is just some data. We've got a system, and what we do in our organisation is we look at people's performance, we look at people's potential, and it's basically a 9-box. And we use a piece of software called Sonar 6 because it makes really cool pictures like that. But what that tells us is the top right-hand box are the people we're saying, okay, these are people who've got a high level of capability, and we probably need to do something with them. And all the little colours mean different parts of the business. People who are in the flexible pros are also people we need to do something with. So the vertical axis is performance and the horizontal is potential. So we're saying people who are performing really well with potential, we've got to do something with. The obvious thing for us, and there's a whole lot of problems, so once you do this you create some problems for yourself. Big questions for us were, who are the biggest risks? So we've got a lot of people, we've got some talented people, who are we worried about losing? Next question, who would really develop from getting some development? Who do we need to actually build? Who do we need to improve? Who do we need to do something with? How do we challenge them? How do we get some of these high potential people who are doing the job we want and really challenge them and really get them thinking and get them engaged? How do we get some diversity in our organisation? One of our big goals is how do we create more female leaders in the organisation, and how do we do that internally? How do we also build some career paths? In a business like ours, it's quite specialised in lots of areas. And how do you actually build leaders and bring these through the organisation? So they're all pretty simple questions. Every business has got them, and we're kind of going, okay, how do we answer these? Some other problems we had a group of really high calibre people. These people really wanted development, and these were the 26 people, the journey we took on, were very competent, very high calibre people, probably a lot of whom fell into that group of who might we lose. We've got a pipeline of talent, so what that picture shows you is there's lots of people who've got potential, and we've got to do something with them, because if we don't, we're going to lose them. We've also got to give some of these people some development so they can do the jobs we want them to do. We really needed to get some critical thinking. We needed to get some innovation, we needed to get some people excited about stuff, we needed to get people collaborating. So these were all the kind of things which we were trying to do on this journey. The big one as well, we really needed the executive team to own this and get involved with this. And often people say, yeah, you need the executive team involved, and with leadership development and trying to create some leaders, you do. If you want to be really good at this, there's 3 things you need to do. And one is have a commitment organisationally. Say, okay, we want to do this, which may mean we spend money, it may not. Another tip is saying, okay, how do we try and do this in-house? If it's in-house, it really links with what your business is doing. And the last thing, how do we actually create some careers out of this at the end point? And that for us was a real challenge. We're a small business, not lots of roles. How do you take these people who now you've primed for development and try and create the roles? So what I want to do is just give you 6 things which we did, which I think kind of worked for us. And I want to talk to each of these 6 points. So how do we get the executive engagement? How do we get the people? What do we do? How do we give them feedback and really build them? How do we use a project to tie a lot of this together? And that's where Hargraves really came to the fore. And then how do we build a lot of coaching and mentoring into this? David Busson worked really well in finding us some excellent mentors. And for us it was, okay, let's leverage the Hargraves network. And David found some wonderful people from across Brisbane to be mentors for a lot of our people. So we had a senior female who was the company secretary. There wasn't really a good strong mentor in the business for her. And David went out and sourced somebody, which was a great match. The organisational project, and this was the thing which tied it together. So what you've seen is a whole lot of disparate topics, which went over a period of time with some events, with some coaching. The big tie point was the organisational project. So when we ran this, we had two groups in parallel. So one we called our rising leaders, one we called our senior leaders, doing similar content, but in parallel. The organisational project, we brought all of those people together. So we brought 26 people together and gave them a project over 5 weeks. 5 weeks was not long enough. So in 5 weeks, we want you to assess different areas of the organisation, different parts of the organisation, different concepts, which the executive team came up with, and we want a project on it. Now, these were busy people, working really hard about how do we operate together, how do we all turn up at a meeting, how do we participate, who's doing all the work here. So all of the project stuff starts coming out, and David worked with each of these teams. So there was a lot of really interesting behaviours. People who disengaged, I'm too busy, I can't be involved. People who brought out the natural behaviour of, oh, I will do all the work. And it was very interesting. The people in the projects were looking at the projects, we were looking at the people outside. And it was really interesting to see some of the learnings people had, how do you deal with conflict? One of the challenges I think we don't teach people enough is, in an executive team, if you're not the CEO, you've got to work with peers. You can't control them, you can't tell them what to do, you've got to influence them. Everywhere else in our organisations, we have a manager and we have a hierarchy. So for these people, it was a real test. What we got was David and Alan to do a workshop on innovation. How do you innovate? How do you think from an innovation point of view? And then we set them loose. So they had to collect data, they had to think, they had to work through a whole lot of different personal things as well as work things. David Busson worked very closely with each group and coached them to bring this outcome together. The COO, Ram Kangatharan, was the sponsor of it. So he was pretty much the power broker of the bank at that point in time. So he was key in terms of driving these, making these happen, and he was fascinated and interested by it. And we presented to our executive team. Our CEO was absolutely astounded at the quality of presentations. And again, that engagement piece, the executive team saw people at their absolute best. It was fantastic because they got the opportunity to present. They did some really innovative thinking. I guess one of the big learnings for us and one of the big learnings for the executive team, though, is how do you implement those projects into business? One of the things we didn't do that well is we did the projects and then it's, okay, how do we move that forward? But a very good learning and a very critical part. Also, it made the collaboration work. So people from different levels, different parts of the organisation working in a pressure cooker environment. So the output, and I haven't put a lot of outputs in here. I was thinking about this and I thought I could write this many people got promoted, so on and so forth. But just two things which I really saw we had 26 fired up leaders. So we had 26 people in our business who were really fired up. The other thing, which was it was a kind of intended consequence, was a real sense of restlessness. So we had some people now who were really challenging the way their leaders operated. And there were some really interesting conversations. So one of the guy in Treasury, who'd worked in our Treasury for years, had a conversation with me and he thought, I thought all this leadership stuff was BS, right? What do we need this stuff for? And our Treasury room's a trading room where, men are men and everybody else can kind of go away. It's one of those environments. And he really challenged that. He really challenged leadership. He really challenged how they were operating. He really challenged how his boss operated and why weren't they looking at strategy and why weren't they talking about development and why weren't they doing all those things which actually made people perform better. For him, it was a very restless period, and he's still challenged by that because he's trying to create change. The other big thing I saw in a lot of these people was confidence. Wasn't necessarily the content, it wasn't necessarily what we went through. I think the recipe and the stuff we did produce some things. Our content wasn't spectacular. But what we had was people who really believed in themselves and felt confident. The organisation said, hey, we believe in you and we think you're a great leader. So these people went, wow, maybe it's true. After 12 months and after having David in the area, they kind of went, it is true. I can do things.